Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Welcome to Fearless Females. Thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate all you listeners out there. Today we're meeting with Sarah Goodman, and the thing that I liked most about speaking with her is just talking about how she does things a bit differently. I know that a lot of you sometimes in your industries will find that there are things that have been done a certain way for years and years and years. And when you try and change that up or shake it up a little bit and make it a little bit different, you sometimes get some pushback. And I loved how she deals with this pushback and stands her ground and kind of has conviction in what she's doing. So let's get started. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm so excited. We're talking to Sarah Goodman today. She is the president and managing partner of Eminence M&A Strategies. And I've been looking forward to speaking to her for weeks. So I'm excited to chat with you today, Sarah. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be in the roster of Fearless Females.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get to know you just a little bit better. My very first question always is, I ask this question all the time. So my book list on the side of my desk has gotten even bigger than it was before. But what is your favorite book? Tell me what I should be reading.
Oh my goodness, such a hard question. I have a go-to that is a new go-to for me. I've got some favorites but I feel like lots of people say those. So as part of a professional group, we did this kind of interesting book swap. Mm-hmm. And I think something you and I were talking about before we started recording was, this idea of sort of the introverted extrovert, you love talking and meeting with people. So this is a book that was I obtained. It's called Potluck Culture as part of a sort of professional white elephant book exchange. And it's very different from the perspective. It kind of provides a new lens about engaging in the workplace. And I really enjoyed it. And so much of I feel like a lot of these books that are out there about kind of professional networking also are all about Never Eat Lunch Alone. I think some of those are great books, but they also kind of play into this never stop working kind of mentality. Uh-huh. And so I really enjoyed this book that I was accidentally given to me. So
I have never heard of it. That sounds so interesting. I like the idea. I am kind of a workaholic, but I always tell my admins, I'm like, don't turn into me. You set some boundaries. You make sure that you go take a walk. In fact, I kick them out of the office to go take a walk every once in a while, but I don't do the same thing. So
yeah, it is a millennial trait, I think, that we all just work and work and work and work. And I am working on putting some balance back into my life. I also just onboarded a full-time EA, and I am working on letting go of some things and delegating, but it is a work in progress.
It always is. I always love to hear how other successful women navigate that, because it's such a hard thing. And I think especially for women, as we just give and give and give, to our work, to our families, to our lives. And sometimes we forget that we need to take care of ourselves as well. So it'll be interesting to delve into that. Thank you for that suggestion. So, Sarah, tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you're at today? What brought you along this path, and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I did not have a traditional path to M&A, which is mergers and acquisitions. I never would have pictured myself as someone working some days chest deep in financial services. But I started my career really in legal. When I was in college, I had kind of an internship, part-time work opportunity with a law firm. I thought I was going to go to law school. I took the LSATs, I did the whole thing. And for whatever reason, just in somewhere inside, I just knew that was not going. I mean, I adored all the people. I'd love to. The funny joke is I worked with lawyers for 4 years and I decided not to be a lawyer, but that's not true. They were all wonderful, delightful people who I still have the opportunity to cross paths and work with. It just wasn't for me. And so I had this kind of postgraduate period of doing some different things and kind of figuring out what I was good at and honestly failing. One of my favorite stories to tell is I got hired as a sort of middle manager in my early 20s at a pretty large company, which was a terrible decision on everyone's part. Did not have the emotional intelligence to be a people leader at that stage in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fired from that job, which was at the time very difficult. But, it really did teach me a lot. And so in the subsequent years, I worked in agency and really hit my stride being a people leader, growing and mentoring a sales team, and sort of accidentally happened into a pretty large role managing considerable hundreds of millions of dollars in P&L responsibility, a very large team, and really found a passion in helping people be their best and really helping clients and people achieve their goals. And it was a switch that sort of flipped around the pandemic, I think, for a lot of people, that I kind of decided that corporate life, even though, again, it was my proving ground, it was where I found what I was good at. A switch sort of flipped around the pandemic. Certainly becoming a woman of a certain age and small children, you sort of take stock of how you're spending your time.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition got on my radar, and I started really going through that process. My husband and I had always been in real estate. We'd done some, increasingly larger projects, and then we did acquire a business. And so my experience through that entire thing was, wow, this is a big, wide world. I'm really interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's not very many people that look like me in that space.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of, there's some technology that seems to be missing. There's some processes that seem to be missing. And so with a couple of transactions under my belt, a lot of operational experience, and honestly, a whole lot of audacity. Because I do not have an MBA. I did not work at Morgan Stanley or Goldman.
Yeah.
These are not things in my pedigree. But I decided to open my own boutique investment bank, M&A firm, and have really enjoyed it. But a very non-traditional path, from potentially going to law school, getting fired from my first management job, on up to being, manager of a pretty large, huge team, to now being a team of less than fingers I have on my hands, and managing some really interesting transactions. It's been a non-traditional and very fun journey.
Yeah, I love it when we find, whether on accident or purpose, but when we find those things that we're like, oh, this is where I was always meant to be, even though it may have been a curvy path rather than a straight path there. I'm always in awe of people that know exactly what they want to do at 20. I didn't know. I still am not sure what I want to do. I know it's finance, but I'm not exactly sure which direction we go in, right?
Yeah, and I think the reality is, I do something I really enjoy is I've had the opportunity to mentor some school. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and fortunately here we have the McCombs Business School through the University of Texas. But I've had the opportunity to mentor some young women in that organization, and I've tried to explain to them, and I think someone tried to explain it to me. Everyone's path is a little curvy. People kind of show you on social media and on LinkedIn, these CVs. Everyone has, they have an external facing storyline, but everybody's path is a little curvy, and most people don't have it figured out. People who are C-suite executives at Fortune 100 companies, I've worked with them. they are winging it sometimes. They also don't have all the answers. Their path wasn't straight. And there's so many opportunities to be found in those curves. Embrace them. Don't try to straighten everything out. The curves are good.
Yeah, teaches you something along the way. I thought it was really interesting. You talked about, that position that you were in where things didn't work out and you got fired out of that position. But it sounds like your next position, you were in charge of a team, and in fact, a larger team. So why didn't the first one work out, but the second one really hit your sweet spot?
Well, I think that the first one, the company. So here's some corporate 101 here, right?
Uh-huh.
If you don't have a lot of youth in your middle management team, don't just pluck a bunch of inexperienced people right out of school and stuff them in jobs managing people with not a lot of coaching or training. I know it seems like maybe that's a good idea. Of course, I'm being facetious, but it's a terrible one. So the big difference, that was an initiative where they were really trying to introduce, they kind of saw what we're still seeing play out now, the kind of baby boomers. They realized that due to a number of circumstances, their middle management team, there wasn't a lot of layers from an experience and age standpoint. So I actually applaud them for recognizing it and trying to put something in place. But the execution, the training, the mentorship was just not there. And so the second time around, I rose organically through the ranks. I started that position cutting purchase orders. Basically, truthfully, this company had a DOS-based computer system. If anyone here is, there are people who are listening to this podcast, I'm sure, who are going to have no idea what that even is. But
Yeah.
It was kind of a DOS-based ordering. I started, really tabbing through order pages and really worked my way up through the ranks to be a director of client services, managing, portfolio accounts for major, like Fortune 10 companies, which was, so I think there was a lot of learning along the way. I had to kind of stepwise, instead of instantly being in charge of a bunch of people that were older and more experienced than me,
Mm-hmm.
I had to kind of earn it a little bit along the way. And I had a lot, I scraped my knees along the way. I made mistakes. I'm sure I have acknowledged that for every person that tells me I'm the best boss they ever had, I'm sure there are people out there that feel like I'm the worst boss they ever had,
Uh-huh.
because I definitely had to learn. But instead of instant, the second time around, it took me almost 10 years to get to that role. And that was 10 really valuable years of experience, incremental growth, and some great wins and some hard lessons.
Oh, that's really interesting. The idea of just learning along the way and learning from your mistakes and how that piece, you can't really skip it. I find that interesting.
Maybe some people can, but this person could not.
So I know that if I went back to when I was 20 years old and saw the way I did things, I have changed quite dramatically since then. So what, if you could look back, Sarah, on your journey and the way it's gone, what is the best investment that you made in yourself? Can you think of one thing that you're like, I'm so glad I did that?
Oh my gosh. One of the best investments I made in myself was professional coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot about, I don't remember exactly who said this, but it might have been Kristen Bell. I don't know if that makes my advice any better or worse, but I think there was some famous person. I was probably, doom scrolling, mindlessly scrolling, and something kind of caught my eye about, just like the diet we consume for our food, we intake a lot through our eyes and ears as well. And so just like, potentially the idea of having an expert, kind of dietitian help you with your physical wellness, having an electrician who's an expert help you with your home, having a person who's a financial planner, having an expert help you with these very specific areas of their expertise. I hired an executive coach. While I rose through the ranks, this is something that women experience. Another great book, I know you didn't ask me, but How Women Rise is another favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of obtained this really great goal of being in a leadership position. but I was miserable. And I thought it was something I was doing wrong. And executive coaching really helped me understand that I just hadn't let go of some old roles. The company I was working with, I don't think that they were intentionally asking me to do 3 jobs. I find that hard to believe. But they were certainly accustomed to me doing 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of through executive coaching, I learned more about executive presence, about how to really map and have difficult conversations, about how to set boundaries, about how to really understand what pushes my buttons. I'm an achievement oriented person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get a lot of serotonin and satisfaction from completing things. And so sometimes that leads me to work on the wrong things or causes me to take on things that are quick, quick achievements rather than, really dedicating myself to the task of something that's going to take longer and it's going to be rewarding. So those were some things that I needed to unpack about myself and get some tools. And I'd strongly recommend, if there are a wide range of coaches out there for a wide range of reasons that you might need some tune-up, I'd highly, highly recommend it.
So how did you find a good coach? Because there are lots of coaches out there and lots of people that are willing to coach you. How do you find the ones that work for you?
My suggestion is always to work, for most things, my suggestion is to work backwards from what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to accomplish? What is your pain point? And then kind of identify a coach that has a specific practice at resolving that pain point. And if you don't really know what success looks like, many coaching firms, the firm here in Austin that I worked with, they're national. It's a firm called Work, WERQ, led by an incredible woman incredible woman-owned business. They have a number of assessments. There are some leadership tools where you can start to really understand maybe the areas that are going to be the most impactful for you. So I'd recommend starting with the end in mind. And if you're not quite sure what that is, focus first on some assessments before you just run out and hire somebody.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And I think that idea, I read a steady diet of leadership and entrepreneurship and things like that. And that idea of kind of knowing who you are and knowing where your weaknesses are, that's sort of important to have a really good understanding of, the good and the bad about yourself.
Yeah. And what drives and what really motivates you, what brings you a lot of satisfaction, and what kind of drains you, what drains you. Let's not do those things. Let's find a way around the things that really drain you.
Yeah, exactly. What is the worst advice someone gave you? And did you take it? Did you not take it? Did you learn from it?
Oh my gosh, worst advice I've been given. I have been told in the past few years of doing this role so many times that I'm I'm not going to be successful, which is so wild to me. Like that someone would say, like in real time, they would make that assertion is so insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or that I'm not going, basically the way that I do things in our industry is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it upsets some parties that are used to the way that they do things. And so often they're like, well, that worked for a little while, but that's not going to work for you in the long run. You're really going to need to do things this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been quite stubborn about, kind of doing things in a different way and being, I have a colleague who says that I'm not going to get it just right, but he says you're thoughtfully antagonistic, very kind and very pensive, but you have a lightly contrarian viewpoint that I find really refreshing. And so that definitely ruffles some feathers in this space that is very traditionally dominated by a very singular type of person.
Mm-hmm. And when you try and change or do things a little bit differently, that sometimes rubs against the grain, the traditional grain. So how do you keep your spirits up and be like, I know this isn't the traditional way we're doing things, but this is the way that I'm doing things. Like, how do you
persevere? I would say I'd love to sit here and tell you that every day is sunshine. Entrepreneurship is hard. And I think the thing that really keeps me going, and this was very good advice I got way back from when I worked at that law firm, a mentor, was around kind of finding your tribe. Find a peer group, find a place where you can, openly share and be vulnerable. Someone that is also kind of cheerleading for you. And so I have a couple of those places for myself. And because there is no straight up, I think that there are a handful of companies or, businesses that it was just overnight success. But most people that you see that are successful, you're only seeing the part here at the end. You haven't seen all the 10 or 15 years of kind of trials and tribulations. So find some people to be shoulder to shoulder with you during the good times and when there's some really big challenges.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think that it does help to have those people where you can go, you can go to them and be like, it's just been a rotten day. And they're like, you know what? You're doing great, Sarah. Life is going to get better and you're a good person and you're doing good things in the world. That's always helpful, I think.
It is. It's super helpful. And it's also like, even when bad things happen, they're really bad in that moment, but some things that this whole thing, like I got fired, like there are times that at the time a thing was happening and it ended up being the branch in my path that was really a step towards a much better place. And so even when things are like setbacks happen, the windshield is always bigger than the rearview mirror for a reason. We need to see behind us. We need to kind of know what's just there. But there's a reason the windshield is so much larger. The look forward, work through, learn from your past, but keep marching.
Yeah, I that's a philosophy I follow as well, to kind of look at what you go through it, kind of learn from it, but also keep your eye focused ahead, because if you live in the past and those regrets, it doesn't lead to growth. So what about regrets? Speaking of that kind of thing, can you look back and say, hey, there's something I did along my journey that if I knew what I know now, I would go back and do that differently?
This is such a hard one for me. I know the answer and I don't like it. I was so obsessed with promotion and growth and attainment. And the year I had my daughter, I think I still took something like 30 work trips that year.
Mm-hmm.
And things are different now, even now in that short window. Then I feel like we had a major paradigm shift about family during the pandemic. And I'm grateful for it in some ways. But at the time, I was so convinced that I couldn't let having children slow me down at all. I still had to say yes to all the meetings. I don't want to say famously, but we had like a major RFP proposal after my second daughter was born, and I ended my maternity leave short and flew to Indianapolis, like weeks postpartum, and looking back on that, that was such wasted. Well, number one, it was very dangerous. I should not have been on a plane. Both of my pregnancies, I had preeclampsia. And so, number one, it was very dangerous and short-sighted. And number two, I really missed out on a lot of recovery time and, special time with my girls. I really, really wish I would not have done that. I really wish I would not have done that.
Yeah. So taking that experience, how have you changed? How has your life and your work-life balance changed to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, a conversation I have with all my clients now is I have a family. I am a whole person. Many of the people I work with are business owners, and business hours is sometimes not the best time for me to speak with them because number one, they don't really want their employees to know that they're selling their business. They don't really want, it's hard for them to really speak freely while they're often in the whirlwind of their day. And so a conversation I have with a lot of my clients is, listen, I will meet you where you are. I understand that sometimes 7 p.m. after you've taken your boots off and you've got half a Coors Light down, is maybe the best time to kind of chat about some of these bigger life events. But my kids might make cameos. If my kids are sick, I may not be able to keep that 7 p.m. call. So we have a very real reckoning that if you expect an army of analysts to be at your beck and call every single day, every single hour, don't hire my firm.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to set boundaries. Another big thing I've done is mom burnout is real. I think we are one, maybe two generations in for kind of dual working parents or where women have roles that are substantive in their companies.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly lots of trailblazers before us, but like as a generation, I feel like we're one or two in. And so the burnout of being everything to everyone is really taxing. And I've kind of decided that a few hours a week on Friday afternoon are just for me.
Uh-huh.
I don't work. I don't do anything for anyone else. It is sort of a recharge period for me so that I'm ready to be fully present for my family on the weekend.
I love that. That is a really great idea. And something that I've seen kind of coming up over and over in these interviews is that like no one's going to do it for you. Nobody is going to carve out those hours to make sure that you are whole and healthy and can give 100%. You've got to do it for yourself, and you have to prioritize it too.
Yeah, and I think the other part too is I've really started. I mean, I'm married to a wonderful man who is so supportive, but is also in a first generation in his family of women, really working and doing some of these other things. And so we're trying to kind of learn how to manage and run our household and who's going to do what and how do we divide. And sometimes I get frustrated about, what is available or isn't available or how we're doing things. And then this women have only been able to have their own credit and their own bank accounts for 50 years. Like I'm 40, like this is still kind of a new thing that I think we're so used to very rapid progress, and our lens and our history is so short, and the big scheme of this larger role for women in the workplace. So sometimes sometimes I say, we're not going to solve it all today, right? But it is a challenge, but finding those little ways to say, okay, this is going to get outsourced to someone else. And like neither my husband nor I are going to be able to take this on. We're going to have to outsource this thing so that we can have, spend the quality time. And I cannot, just like at my old company, I can't do 3 jobs. Being a homemaker is a full-time job. Being a working mom is a full-time job. It is not reasonable for any one person to do 2 jobs. I don't diminish either of them, but for my weekend role, I have to have some recharge time. And so I've protected that on my calendars.
Yeah, that's you're preaching to the choir here. I absolutely 100% agree. And there are places that you can offload some of those responsibilities, both in your work life and professional life, but also in your home life. I love the companies that have sprung up that will help meal prep be easier, because if I never have to figure out what to have for dinner ever again, my life would be so much better.
Yeah, I didn't know that being a wife and a mom meant that I was going to be responsible for every calorie consumed for the next 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. One of my greatest things is the kids get older and my kids are leaving home. I tell David, I'm like, I'm never, ever deciding what we're having for dinner. As soon as they move out, I'm never deciding again.
Yeah, it's so, but the other part too is I think like most things, like my family cares a lot. Like I get so stressed out about the meal planning. Are we having spaghetti too often? My family doesn't care about those things as much as I think that they do, So it's, I think I've tried to also just kind of give myself some grace in some place. And also I've tried to turn kind of meal prep and these types of tasks that are not fun into kind of more, I mean, I don't want this to sound like super after school special, like let's make a game out of doing laundry. But I do try to kind of, one of our rituals in like the folding of the laundry is, we kind of watch sort of terrible television that we don't really have time for otherwise. But it's fun. We watch terrible television and we fold and we put the clothes away, and it's just and it goes so fast rather than, oh my gosh, I have all of this laundry to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's funny. We actually did exactly the same thing I have 5 kids. And so doing laundry for a family of 7. Yeah. we got through a whole series by the time we were finished with laundry. So
It's
what
a
about,
when
oh, go ahead.
sorry, when people tell me, like, now that I have to, when I'm an only child. So pre-kids, people would be like, oh, we have 4 kids. I'd be like, cool, that's awesome. Or, and now when people tell me they have like 3, 4, 5 children, I'm like, can I get you some confetti? Do you need a sash? Like, can
Yeah.
I help you? What can I do for you? Do you need a ticker tape parade? Because I'll throw it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think I've often said it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20. It takes all of your time and all of your energy to get those kids raised to adulthood, happy, healthy human beings. So I think we all take that journey and we all do our best with it. But yeah, I crazy is a word I've heard more often than not.
No, I'm sure it's amazing. It's just a lot. It's a lot to raise. Exactly what you said. It is a lot of work. Um, a colleague, when I was having my second and I was feeling overwhelmed, a colleague said something very similar to what you said. You handle what you have, and your life looks different. It's always full, and some things do kind of fall to the wayside, but you handle what you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And amazing women all over the place are doing that and working full time, really heavy, hefty careers, starting their own businesses like you. So it's a journey. And I'm glad that there are other women going on this journey that can kind of give me a little sense of perspective or help me out in some of those ways that I need, for sure.
Yeah.
So if you could go back, Sarah, and talk to your 20-year-old self on the beginning of your journey, what would you tell her?
A lot of the message that I've had some practice with this question, because as I said, I'm working with some 20-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have multiple, potentially you're going to go and be a pediatrician for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you're also going to have 4 kind of different lenses of a work life. You don't have to have it all figured out, and you can embrace that you don't know exactly where you're going is actually kind of a gift, because that means that everywhere is the destination. And so I've tried really hard to kind of give that gift of, like, especially, the McCombs Business School is so competitive. It's so hard driving type A people. And I've explained, not getting the Deloitte internship this year is okay. You're going to be fine. Success is transferable. I'm not sure what you're going to do, but you're going to do something great. And it's okay that you did not get that Deloitte internship.
Mm-hmm.
Let's figure out what you are going. So now that that's not happening, let's mourn that. I'm so sorry. That was sad. But let's focus on these other things. I wish I could go back and give that skill set and mentorship to my 20-year-old self. I think it took me until my late 30s to kind of really, really embrace that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be so much further along if I'd learned that, if I knew that at 20.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have a 20-year-old here in the office, very high achieving. And I had to tell her, I'm like, you know what? If you do this thing for a while and this doesn't end up being your thing, you can pivot. Like this, you aren't deciding today what you have to do for the rest of your life. So
I know. And it's so hard when you're in that moment, right? Like in that moment, these decisions feel so big. Another really interesting kernel I picked up from that attorney I worked for a long time ago was the Doppler effect. Trains or a sound coming towards you, things coming on the horizon, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And like when a train is passing you by and the horn is blowing, it's just deafening, and it's so hard to think about. But then that train is going to pass. And as the Doppler effect happens and the train is going away from you, that horn, while it's still really loud, with time, it doesn't feel that way. And so try to kind of consider things at the time that seem just absolutely cataclysmic. Try to envision, how are you going to feel about this in 5 years? How are you going to feel about this in 10 years? How are you going to feel about this in 40 years? Okay, well, let's react appropriately to how important this is in the grand scheme of our lives.
Yeah, look at it in the overall viewpoint, not just what's right smack in front of you and the blaring horn right now. That's good advice. What scared you the most when you first started down your path, and does it still scare you?
When I told you I had a healthy amount of audacity, I've given this advice to some others as well. I spent a considerable amount of time, personal, physical sacrifice, mental sacrifice for others' success, like kind of going out on my own. I was really comfortable. I mean, and I know that this comes from a place of incredible privilege. So I just want to acknowledge that doing this at the stage of life that I'm at with a dual income family and some savings built up, I'd certainly built a safety net that I am aware that not all others have. So let me just acknowledge that little asterisk, okay?
Yeah.
But I'm perfectly comfortable failing horribly.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather fail horribly betting on myself and giving this a try and building a business with the value set that I want to have than continue to wonder if I'm always just going to be building others' success.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what scares me the most is that I'm not scared. That is sort of a strange thing to say, but I am more, I don't know if I'm in my, I tend to be a person of science, but again, maybe with my, I don't know if my chakras are in a lot, but I'm not. I am not. I have no fear of failure. I am not worried about it at all. I don't know. That feels really scary to say out loud, but that's exactly the way I feel.
You're more worried about not doing it than you are about doing it.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, and I think that's the idea of you're not dismissing or saying there aren't things to be worried about. It's just that you're like, if I try hard, if I work, it's going to work out, and
it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Or also, maybe it won't. Maybe it won't, and then I will sort out what I'm going to do next. But there is such a wide, I know when a lot of people are really stressed out about artificial intelligence, I think that there are some things to be stressed out about it, but I think it's going to be an absolute boon for, productivity and relief for various sectors. And I'm kind of excited. I'm hopeful and excited that it's going to bring a lot of innovation and things that we just can't even really process yet. And so if I'm doing this 10 years from now, amazing. I hope so. That means I'll have helped so many people. And if I'm doing something completely different because technology has eliminated this current job, we've had technology before. We've had nobody makes punch cards anymore. We don't have people that are standing at kiosks processing printed photographs. We've had lots of technological change. So I'm excited for what the future holds. And I hope I'm doing this and I hope I'm successful, but I'm prepared for it to be something different.
Yeah, that idea of things are changing. Embrace the change, embrace the excitement and the hope. I love that idea. What about challenges because you were a woman? You said, when we first started out, you're not a lot of people look like you as far as, in your position and in your job. And what have you faced any unique challenges because of your gender?
I think so. So I will say that I'm first going to talk about some of the advantages. I'm going to say, I'm going to briefly acknowledge those. In my space, I am the demographic other. There are not a lot of people sub 50, and there are not a lot of women. So when, I think that is, I am an alternative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not for everybody, but I think that does give me, if you go to an event and you're meeting, or let's say you're meeting with 6 or 7 firms, you're going to be meeting with 6 people who are all effectively the same and me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you decide that I'm your cup of tea, I'm the only one, So I think that has generated a lot of opportunity for me. So let me just set aside and say that there has been some of that's been positive. I think some of the hard parts about being a woman and certainly being younger than many in my space. There really just aren't a lot of women. And so sometimes that is physically scary. While I would hope and try to believe the best in people, it is very uncomfortable to go to private equity events or other kind of conference type events where there are 50 plus people there and there are literally 2 women.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a challenge. And then the other kind of thing that I've experienced in this space and what kind of prompted me in the first place is when I was going through my own acquisition projects, people would ask me if my husband was going to come to the meeting. They would be like, well, so, I was buying a trucking company and people just couldn't fathom that I knew a lot about trucking and logistics. And I know a lot about trucking and logistics.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with the railroads. I've worked with major freight and transit companies. I know a lot about intermodal and international transit and freight. And so when I was trying to buy a trucking company, people were like, but your husband's going to run the company though, right? And I'm like, no, he doesn't know anything about this. He's a software developer.
Yeah.
And they're like, they just could, and so those kind of similar types of questions I get a lot. And, I think it's rough. Very recently, also sort of inappropriate networking questions. Somewhat recently, someone, I don't even know, I don't want to call this person out because it'll be very obvious, but I get asked some really strange things that I do not think that my male counterparts are asked.
Yeah. That also is a theme that's come up over and over again. How many women are in my industry? There's about 18%, 15 to 18% female financial advisors. What's the percentage then in yours?
The statistics vary. My industry is a little bit segmented in sort of a strange way. So there's sort of the business broker, and then there's like investment banking, and this covers a very wide range of the capital markets. So if you think about like all women in banking, in investment banking or what could be considered investment banking, the number is a little bit higher. Specifically in the lower middle market for primarily sell side exit, less than 3% of the firms are owned by women, and very few women, even in these big firms, women frequently are sort of relegated to associate or more junior roles on large deals. Like right now, I'm a lead on a $70, $80 million deal. And that's a little bit unusual. It's not that it doesn't happen. It's just unusual for women to be the lead advisor on a deal of that size.
Any ideas why? Like, why aren't women coming into that field?
I think a big part of it is, I think it kind of, this is just my opinion. This is not backed by any sort of data. I think it is very intimidating to go to some of these kind of capital events and really be the only one there. I also think that the job is extremely demanding. It requires a lot of experience and it is very time intensive. And so I think that we are still grappling with an infrastructure that hasn't quite figured out how to support mid-career working women who have families. So I think that's a piece of it. Also, typically, depending on the firm size and the type of deals that you work on, the revenue cycles can be peaks and valleys, a little bit feast or famine. And so for a lot of women, that can be challenging, especially if increasingly, I read this the other day, increasingly women are the breadwinner of the family. And so that sort of boom and bust type revenue cycle is not for every family. And it can be, I think that can be really tough for people as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's, we are in similar industries with financial planning and the mergers and acquisitions. They're at least tangential. They work kind of together. And I find some of those same challenges in my industry as well. So I do think though that there are people, and probably you're one of them, who are trying to make that change and make it a more inclusive environment so that women can come and stay and grow in that place.
That's one of the things I'm really hoping that we get from technology, right? Like healthcare, childcare, some of these things are big, hard problems to solve. And I'm hopeful that some of this really innovative technology is going to help us solve some of those challenges. I don't know exactly how, don't ask me, I'm not a technical person, but my hope is that we're going to get some hour relief in some places so that we can, potentially adjust some of these expectations on people and families, people without families, just all across the board that will allow a greater access. But I think a lot of things have to change. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. This one thing is going to make it better. But I kind of remind myself, there was this event and I almost didn't go because I was like, I'm just going to be the only woman there again. But I want to show up because I want another woman to come and to see another face and to know, and we have so many areas. I know that I don't even participate in these conversations about woke or not woke or the mod wife or the trad wife or whatever. I'm not interested in those conversations because I think they sort of the frustrating thing about those conversations is they center the onus on women. No matter what your position is, the woman is still the villain. And I think that that's incorrect and it's not helpful. And so I am hopeful that there's going to be change. I am hopeful that technology, I know lots of people have very negative things to say about millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Some of the people that I'm spending time with, I'm incredibly impressed by these people. And I'm so excited for their kind of fresh perspectives and their tenacity. And I'm looking forward to what they bring to our workforce and to career lives.
Oh, I agree. And I think that this group of women that we have now in the workforce, taking places in the industries that we typically, you are the only woman in the room, but if you look back 10 or 15 years, there wouldn't even have been a woman in the room. So I think that as we help lift and grow, and I find that so many women are willing to do that. They're willing to lift and grow and help that next generation come in and share their experience like you have today so that they might have a little bit of an easier time of it.
And for people creating great spaces for us to share these stories and to have them in a way that's authentic. So like these podcasts and this continued open dialogue and conversation is so important because I think that we've been sort of artificially forced into a binary, butter side up, butter side down. And I think most people, we agree a lot more than it says this in an election year. We agree so much more than I think we disagree, but we're focused on how we've been tricked into focusing on the differences rather than how we are aligned and how we can grow and how we can improve. And I think that these types of conversations where it's just people to people and really open experience sharing is so necessary. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, I love it. So no thanks necessary. But what, Sarah, are you most proud of?
I am most proud. I'm so proud of my family. I'm so proud of my children. I'm so proud of this life that we're building together. And it makes me really excited about the future. And I know that, my path is different than everybody's path, but it's something I'm so proud of that we've built together.
Yeah, that is. And they're going to be the workers of the future. They're going to be the entrepreneurs. They're going to be the change makers of the future. And I completely understand that. I'm pretty proud of my family and my team as well. So what advice would you have? And it sounds like you give advice directly to young women who are looking at coming into this industry, but how would you talk to a woman, or what advice would you give to her if she's just starting down this path that you're already so successful at that would help her get to where you're at one day?
Go for it. Bet on yourself. There are unlimited opportunities for you to bet on someone else. Bet on yourself. If you're not going to put your chips on your own card, nobody else is going to. So bet on yourself. It's hard. I try not to look into the rearview mirror too hard or for too long, but if you bet on yourself, there's so much opportunity. And part of me, I know that I'm successful now because of all the things that I've done in the past and all of the things that have happened and all of that. So you can't go back, you can't revise history and say, okay, if only I would have done this earlier. But it's really hard for me not to say, man, I really wish I'd bet on myself a lot earlier. I'd be so much further along. But that's maybe not the best way to think about it, but bet on yourself. trust in yourself and go for it.
I love that. I love that. Idea of fearless for me. Like, be fearless, take a bet, try it. Thank you so much, Sarah, for spending some time with us today. And I've loved our conversation. I love learning from you. If I have listeners that want to get in touch or ask questions, where do they go?
If they are interested, you can go to eminencestrategies.com. I also have if it's for, speaking, or they just want to kind of meet one-on-one with me about their personal journey, Sarah Goodman with an H.co, not com. SarahGoodman.co.
Perfect. That works so great. Well, thank you. Thank you for spending this time and just letting us hear a little bit about your journey and sharing in your success. And I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a delightful conversation. I really appreciate it.